Good day and welcome to the opening plenary of the FOLIO ALIA EBLIP course. Today I'm going to be taking you through the stages of the evidence-based practice process to give you an overview and to model the process in connection with a particular scenario. So let's start with the definition of what evidence-based library and information practice is. Ultimately, it's about seeking to improve library and information services by bringing together information from a number of sources, including professional working experience and our understanding of what our users need and prefer. As the second part of the definition describes, it is a systematic process involving asking answerable questions, finding evidence, critically appraising or quality assessing that evidence to see what confidence one can place in it, and then, above all, using that evidence in day-to-day practice. And so what we can see it's doing is integrating three important strands of evidence: what our users tell us, what we ourselves as practitioners observe, and what research can tell us with regard to sound decision-making. Here is an overview of the evidence-based library and information practice process as described by Eldridge in 2000. You'll see it's a five-stage process corresponding to that definition that I've just shared with you: formulating a question, searching for the evidence, evaluating its validity, assessing the costs and benefits of different types of action, and then finally completing the loop by evaluating the effectiveness of our actions. And this, within evidence-based practice, has been known as the 5 A's model. These stood for ask, acquire, appraise, apply, and assess, mapping to these 5 stages on Eldridge's slide. But attendance at the EBLIP 5 conference in Stockholm through the workshops and the conference itself revealed limitations when trying to apply a model from evidence-based medicine to evidence-based library and information practice. The first limitation is that unlike medical consultants or GPs at whom evidence-based medicine was targeted, librarians do not tend to be independent practitioners. We tend to work as groups. We make decisions as groups. We support each other through groups. So we need to consider the importance of group decision-making processes. Secondly, library and information questions do not have a large evidence base of empirical studies, where, as in medicine, for example, a single randomized controlled trial could provide a relatively definitive answer. So EBLIP involves piecing together evidence from a number of sources, and these sources may only partially cover the question we're trying to address, but taken together they can help to inform our decision. So as a consequence of the conference in Stockholm, we proposed what is labelled as EBLIP 5.0, named after the 5th EBLIP conference. So EBLIP 5.0 is still 5 A's, but these recognise the group process and the composite nature of evidence. First of all, we articulate a focus question. What is the problem we're seeking to address? Secondly, we assemble the evidence from multiple sources, both local and international. We then assess the studies. This may be formally through critical appraisal, or may be more informally in a process of weighing up the value of different items of evidence. We take what we found back to our team and we agree a course of actions. And then, in a process very similar to action learning, we adapt the actions we originally planned according to the feedback that we've got. So we may slightly modify the intervention, we may add something to the intervention to increase its impact. So we're going to consider a worked example. Now this is a hypothetical example, but it is based on real data collected from a survey of evidence-based library and information practice, and we've just expanded the data to complete the 5-stage process. So these are the two sources. So based on what informants said as part of an academic librarian survey by Luo only last year, and based on evidence identified from an American Library Association fact sheet, we can complete this particular scenario. So, a not unfamiliar scene: an academic subject librarian and a collection development coordinator are in the library basement. They're weeding out books, and they are seeking to have a rationale for how they are choosing which books to deselect. They have insufficient time to look at every single book before making the decisions. Time is tight, they have a limited window of opportunity, so they decide to try and base their decisions upon broad subject categories and how are they used. Deciding to use an evidence-based or 5A approach, they want to use existing best practice and other relevant evidence that they might have locally, so that they're able to defend the process they've undergone, they're able to inform stakeholders of how they've done things, and they can be explicit in how they've resolved the particular practical day-to-day issue. So the first stage, if you remember, of our revised 5As is to articulate a focus question. Now, some of you may be familiar with a way of asking the question which uses a formulation PICO, which asks you to define your population, the intervention, what you're doing with the population, a comparison, what else you could do, and outcomes, which is how you measure the success or otherwise of an intervention. Now, that's very much a medical model, and we've found that within library practice, a model known as SPICE is more appropriate. So SPICE here stands for the ingredients of setting, perspective, intervention or phenomenon of interest, comparison and evaluation. So thinking about our original scenario, we ask the question, in an academic library, that's our setting, from the perspective of library staff, that's our perspective, would weeding of stock based upon usage of broad subject categories, as is proposed, intervention, compared with weeding of each individual title, the comparison, be more efficient, in other words, our frame of evaluation. Now, the context of this particular scenario means we're focusing very much on efficiency for the library staff, but a supplementary question, an equally valid question, could well be considering the perspective of the users, and that would include such evaluation measures as satisfaction. So the second A is to assemble the evidence, and here the librarians decide a need for research to inform their decision, but local data to help contextualize that external research. And so they have a number of measures that they can follow through, searching LISA and LISTA. LISTA is a free online library literature database, and checking out professional association sites for guidance. That leads them to a pre-prepared resource list that we've identified earlier from the American Library Association. They would then weigh up the studies, assess the studies, see what there is of value, see any cautions in the research methods, any limitations that the authors identify, or any reservations that they may have about the article. In this particular case, because of the immediacy of the problem, they're not formally critically appraising the studies, but that is certainly part of the process that we'll be introducing you to. Then, based on what they've found, they agree actions, what they're going to do on the ground, and so they decide to weed on the base of academic subject headings, and they review books where there is low usage, and make those candidates for possible weeding, whereas those with high usage are moved into a new storage area to generate even higher rates of usage. And then finally, adapt after evaluating the impact. So following this experiment, the librarians want to see what the users feel about access to the titles. They run an online survey and some focus groups. Again, we'll cover methods of data collection throughout the course. And bringing a new perspective, they define a new question. So they ask, what impact do data-informed weeding policies, the same intervention, have on perceptions of stock coverage and quality? Our evaluation here, but from the perspective of library users. Now, this systematic way of making decisions has been charted by Denise Koufogiannakis in a model that she presented at an earlier EBLIP conference. This is a model for evidence-based collection management. Of course, evidence-based practice can take place in a number of settings: reader services, outreach, any aspect of library practice. But in this particular context, evidence-based collection management involves bringing together core data that you have from routine statistics, local data that helps you identify your own context, with innovative data taken from the library literature and perhaps from library assessment measures. And as a result of these, you can plan to introduce new interventions, or in some cases stop undertaking interventions that are proving ineffective. So we hope that this has given you a practical overview of the EBLIP process. Here is some optional reading that will help to orientate you to what we've discussed, and we'll be taking you through over the next few weeks, step by step, through the 5 A's process, encouraging you to think about these questions in the context of your own day-to-day practice and research that will inform that. So thank you for your attention. We're happy to receive any comments or emails through the library classroom. Thank you very much. Bye.